Okay, so I was requested to show you how to make the doll clothes patterns using nail tape and drop cloth. Drop cloth being this thin plastic material. I got this at the Dollar Tree for $1. It's very fine. It's the consistency of a plastic bag you'd get at the grocery store. But it's clear with no patterns on it. So this way you can draw on it and everything will be visible without overlapping patterns. Right now I'm trying to find the end of my nail tape so I can make a pattern for you. Oh, there it is. I am using a copper nail tape. It's very fine and it works excellent for making doll patterns on the bodies because it's flexible, it doesn't leave residue, it's excellent, and you can get it at, I'm sure probably most nail salons, whatever, sell it, but I got mine on wish.com for free for 30 rolls of the stuff, and all I had to pay was shipping and handling, which was like $2 or $3. The only problem is it takes a while to get here because it's coming from China. So just a heads up if you go that route. I'm going to make a little sweetheart neckline here on Dracula just to show you an example of how this is done. So really what you got to do is, first off, you want to do the line for where you want center points to be. Usually you go where the nipples would be. Hopefully that doesn't offend anyone, but it is biological terminology. And you just snip a little piece off right there. And that's the high points of the breasts on the doll. And you go and you make your princess lines, which goes down the center point of the bust line, down the breast, and down the torso. I hope this is visible to you. I'm not looking at my phone screen right now. I'm just kind of doing this. And then you don't have to do both sides because you can do one half of this and fold your pattern in half. This is just basically to get the basic patterns out of the drop cloth that you'll transfer onto paper later. Because you don't want to use just the drop cloth patterns forever because they're so flexible and flimsy. This is just to get you your temporary patterns that you'll transfer onto paper later. Then we'll go down our side here. This is the hardest part, is getting down the sides, I've noticed, because if you follow the seam down her side, which works excellent, you get a great midpoint, but it's also really hard to follow with the nail tape because of the extreme curvature of her body. You can't get it perfect every time, but just do your best. You'll notice I'm leaving excess pieces here. Don't worry about that. Like, it's a little long under her armpit here. Don't stress over that. It's great to actually have that because then you've got a little something to grab onto when you go to remove this later. And now to do the curve, I like to start over here. You can go around the back too and do one down the center of her back like this, but sometimes you don't need to worry about that. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just trying to do a brief tutorial on what I'm doing here. And then you just take it and you go around the side wherever you want the under bit to go, the top line of the sweetheart neckline here. So that's the side seam. You go up over the top of the bust line, around the bust, turning your tape as you go. I'll get back in view here. I'm probably off camera and I apologize. And down. I kind of crisscross to under the opposite breast that you just went around. And then you trim it. Being careful not to scratch your doll with your scissors, obviously, because scratches are not fun. Now this isn't going to be great because I'm just doing an example here. I'm not going to be making any real clothes out of this. But as you can see here, you now have half of a pattern. You can go around the bottom too for where you want your waistline to be. or you can just leave it as is and just kind of wing it. I'm just going to leave it like this and wing it for right now, just because I'm trying to save time. This is already becoming a very long tutorial. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your drop cloth and wrap it around the doll a little bit here. I should have done a center line so I knew where to fold it. No, I think I'm going to do that first before I take and do the drop cloth. You're going to do a center line with your nail tape. If my scissors would let it go. And go right down the center here so I know where to put the fold. There we go. And that's the center of the pattern. And you take your drop cloth and you put it over the doll. Now you take your Sharpie. You can use a finer point one than I'm using. I just have this one handy. And you draw. You try to get it as flat as you possibly can. You just kind of trace your outlines. You don't need to do the center one between the nipples, where her nipples would be. You don't have to worry about that. But you do want to worry about the princess line, because that's going to be a seam. It's a little bulky, but you can clean this up when you transfer it over to paper. Just worry about tracing it as best you can. And as you can see, I have part of a pattern. You turn her over onto her side. This is the hard part, is getting the side piece here, because the curve is really awkward. But do your best to get the plastic around her. If you have to, flip it around. Just make sure you remember your orientations, because these do have to line up later. If you have to, make notes on your pieces. Alright, Drac, put your arm down. And you just go over the nipple and down around the bust line. Down the side, the seam here. Trace around the top. And down the side. And I'm stopping at her panty line, just for ease of pattern transferring. Now I'm just going to do these two pieces here, because that's the easiest thing to do. It's not the cleanest lines, and you're going to want to definitely go ahead and edit them slightly when you transfer them to paper, adding like a little curvature for the bust line, because that's not real evident here. A basic understanding of pattern making will help you immensely. There's many tutorials on YouTube on this. I'm just going to cut them out. Easy peasy. And once you get them cut out, all you do is you trace them onto a piece of paper. You can add your seam allowances then. I wouldn't add them onto the plastic just because you have to edit the patterns a little bit to clean them up. These are really rough. But it gives you a general idea of the size and shape that you need. There's the side piece. Let's see if I can get this curvature here for the sweetheart neckline. It's my favorite pattern to do, is a sweetheart neckline. Ooh, cut that a little close, but that's okay. Like I said, you fix it up when you transfer it onto paper. Now it is really fiddly to cut out because it's so flimsy. If you get a sturdier drop cloth, it'll be harder to manipulate around the doll, but it will also be a more stable pattern piece when you go to cut it out, and you might not need to transfer it over to paper. But these are my two pattern pieces. Here's the front piece. You've put that on a fold of the paper, and when you open up the paper, you will have your perfect sweetheart neckline front. I've got some scrap paper here from other patterns that I was making. I think I made a little sweater jacket like thing with this piece. I'm going to fold it in half to show you how you do the sweetheart neckline piece. Let's move the side piece out of the way so I don't lose it. You just take it, you put the center seam right on the fold. Grab your pencil, if I can get mine out from under the paper here. And then you trace. Easy peasy. You gotta make sure you get the curves. Try to get this part as straight as possible. And you just kind of come down around the bottom. And when you go to cut this out, just leave it on the fold. Make a note if you have to. And just right fold here. So this way you know you can either leave this pattern folded in half and put this on the fold of your fabric, or you can unfold it and cut out the whole piece in one shot. And then you do your side piece. You would do the back obviously too for this. I'm just cutting things quick here for time's sake. So this way you're not watching my tutorial for an hour and a half. But you just trace around it. Get the general shapes. Try to get as close as you can here. Now mind you, this is really rough again. So you may have to edit your pieces when you actually stitch them together. Adding darts, shoring up the sides a little bit, you know, tightening it up a little bit. But this will give you a nice base to work with so you know where you're going with it. I always recommend making a draft piece, a draft dress or shirt or whatever you're making. Make that first out of muslin, scrap cloth. Don't use your good fabric when you're doing this until you know you got it right. So I'm going to round out the bust a little bit here. It might make it a little too big for how I just did that, but I'm not going to be using this as an actual pattern. I'm just doing examples. But I will show you here what I've got. Then you just cut these out and you're good to go. And you've got your pattern pieces. You can add your seam allowances here or on the fabric, whatever you prefer. And that's the gist of it. I hope you learned something today. I hope that was helpful, and have a great day. Bye.